THA Talks, for free thought and open minds.
And for freedom of speech.
Hello, I'm Paul Obitelli and welcome to another edition of THA Talks, the alternative podcast show from the UK. Our talks include news, conspiracy, spirituality, the occult, science, history, art, philosophy, religion and much more. If you'd like to check out our full archive, just go to www.thatalks.com to listen to or to download all our free content. And if there's anyone who'd like to contact us and give us some feedback, maybe you'd like to recommend a guest for the show, you can email us info@thatalks.com. And don't forget, you can subscribe to the show via our RSS feed, and you can also find us on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, YouTube, and many other podcast directories out there. Hello, welcome back to the show. It's good to be back. I know it has been a really long time this time. What can I say? It's been a crazy old world. And my personal position has been a bit topsy-turvy the last year or so now. So it's been difficult, and this has just made it really difficult. I'm really sorry. I'm not jacking it in. I know I keep saying that, but I will keep coming back and doing shows. And it's been crazy with all this stuff going on at the moment, because it's in my head. I go around, I think I need to get to some shows and start knocking this stuff out. But I will keep trying. We're going to be speaking with John White again today. Those of you who have come in here and listened to John speak with me before, really into his QAnon movement, and at the moment that's on fire because obviously it's connected to a lot of what people are talking about now relating to the election in America with Donald Trump. Apparently he's now lost, and Joe Biden is going to be the new president of America. But is he? That's what we're going to talk about mainly today. I mean, there's so much to talk about, but we're going to be hitting on that subject with none other than John White. How are you doing, John?
Hello, Paul. Hello, THA. Yes, here we are again, and what times we are living in. Did you ever think to see the light, Paul?
It's been unbelievable, isn't it? It's just got... I tell you, who needs Netflix or anything like that? You just got...
Yeah, right. I mean, speaking as a writer, you know, I could say right now, you couldn't make this up.
Yeah. It's. I mean, we've had. I mean, the whole year, obviously, with the coronavirus and then the lockdowns, which has increasingly become more suspicious. Now we've got the vaccine that's out, which everyone knew was waiting for that to happen.
I had to admit on that one. Originally I thought I could be responsible. I could take this seriously. But the more that time has gone on, the more it's been clear that just what a globalist play this whole coronavirus situation has been.
Absolutely. I think to sum it up, they've made a mountain out of a molehill, basically. And not to dismiss those who have suffered from it, but it is in the grand scheme of things, in the millions population, it's a molehill. That's what I believe, anyway.
Well, you'd have to be very trusting not to think that crippling the West, and especially America, hasn't been some sort of deliberate strategy now, wouldn't you, Paul?
Absolutely.
Which, of course, brings us ever so much into what's happening in America right now, because all of a sudden, if you voted for Joe Biden, you can dance, you can hug in the streets, you can share bottles of champagne around, and nobody in the media is going to say anything about what an irresponsible person you're being over COVID.
Yeah, I cannot believe how people still watch those mainstream outlets. I literally cannot watch them. I just flick on. There's certain radio stations that are literally 2 minutes and I've got to turn it off because it's so full on now, isn't it? It's just so that the propaganda is immense.
Well, there's a difference between seeing what they're saying and believing what they're saying.
Yeah.
And it's never been more obvious, especially to anybody who supports President Trump in his efforts to get re-elected for a second term. I mean, the media have earned themselves the right to be called fake news, the enemy of the people. And no matter how much they hate it, I don't think we're ever going to see the lid go back on that box. Skepticism is the new black, isn't it? Everybody's everybody who's of a questioning mind, who's tried to think for themselves about what's going on in life and society, knows that the trust in the media is now a memory from the past.
Yeah, I mean, we've obviously got a lot of ground here to cover. There's so many things. There's still Brexit. There's the virus. There's the vaccine. But we're obviously going to be. I mean, we're likely to touch on a lot of that during this conversation. But obviously, the Trump thing. And of course, I'm sure you're going to touch on the QAnon side of it, which I'm sure.
Yeah, I could. Well, we are going to have to really go for it because when we're talking about America and we're talking about the American election, this is not a simple picture. America is a big and complex place. And all 50 states, they all have variants between each other with their different rules for how elections are conducted. And that's under normal circumstances. And when we add in all these unsolicited mail-in votes, which have swamped the election system and caused this massive chaos, to actually analyse what's going on, we probably need to podcast over many hours rather than just one. Yeah. So I can only kind of break it down and try and get the rough shape of the picture across. I mean, we can start with what you just mentioned there, which is the coronavirus vaccine. And all through the election campaign, our beloved media were saying President Trump is a liar. President Trump is a liar. He hasn't got a vaccine. He's a liar. He's a liar. And what did we have announced 2 days ago? The Pfizer coronavirus vaccine. Now, we could say that Pfizer, being a corporation which has donated vast amounts to the Democratic Party, was holding back that announcement until after the election so that it didn't benefit President Trump. But doesn't that just show you how cynical everything about the 2020 election has been?
Oh, yeah. I mean, the thing is as well, I've heard a lot of people say, oh, it wasn't Trump, it was a third-party private company. But what they don't tell you is he cut a lot of regulations so they could work quicker, didn't he? That's what he done. He was very vocal about that.
Pfizer themselves lied.
Yeah.
They said they weren't part of Operation Warp Speed, which was this massive mobilization of government and military assets in order to speed up the vaccine, the development and distribution of the vaccine. And of course, I quite understand that people have got misgivings about it. I can't say I'm jumping up and down to be the first to be jabbed with a thing. And, if we're following what we're seeing about Bill Gates and the globalist side of things there with the WHO and Agenda 30 and so forth, you may very well not want to have it.
Well, the difference is, I think Trump will say to people, here's the vaccine, it's as healthy as we can get it, have it if you want. Whereas I think Biden's the type that would go, you have to take it, put that mask on, take that vaccine, do as you're told, or you're not leaving your house.
We're definitely looking at, things going mandatory, which is, as un-American as you can get, and... I mean, it's all very concerning, but it is part of the times we live in. Nevertheless, the fact is, Trump said there was a vaccine. The media said he lied. They used it to attack him during his campaign, and Trump was telling the truth.
Yeah.
So I thought we better kind of start by discussing what's going on.
What is going on, indeed.
What the different elements of that are. And hopefully, we wind up to a place where we can say, okay, is there any chance that President Trump can actually remain president for a second term? So we try and speak to that picture. So the first thing we've got to discuss is what actually happened last Tuesday. Now, I set my alarm clock for nice and early o'clock on Wednesday morning, so that I could get up and follow. I took a nap so that I could stay up all night here in Britain and follow what was going on. And I actually followed two different channels with the election results. The one I followed was Steve Bannon, who also had Raheem Kassam on with him. Yeah. And the other was Cenk Uygur with his Young Turks channel.
Oh, blimey.
So I sort of flipped between the two. I sort of had a few minutes of one and a few minutes of the other, and I flipped between them both over the course of several hours. Because I thought that way I can get both sides of the picture. And what is very clear what is very, very clear was that for the first few hours, as the results started to come in, Cenk Unger and his crew were convinced they had lost.
Yeah, I saw that, yeah.
It wasn't even a debate for them. They were going, oh, bloody hell, Democrat Party, we told you, oh, you mainstream Democrats, so you didn't listen to us. You've done it, no gains, we're not taking anything new, we're not achieving any objectives, you've blown it.
Yeah.
That was the conversation. Whereas obviously the Bannon crew were a bit more upbeat, like, yes,
I was listening to Sargon of Akkad's channel, and it was they were showing images of the Young Turks, and they just looked as miserable as anything.
Well, they always do, really. But, of course, I was hoping for a repeat of some of the glorious salt of 2016, but we can't have everything we want now, can we, Paul?
No.
But the fact is that, that is how the early analysis of the early results looked. And this all changed when the key battleground states of Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Georgia, and Nevada all announced they were going to stop counting. And that was, around about midnight US time. So they said, that's it, we've had enough of the day, we're going to carry on in the morning. Which was,
like, no, carry on.
Unusual.
Carry on. You know what I mean?
And it's a bit unusual. You don't expect that. No, we have that.
There's a lot of people watching on television. Count, please. Keep counting.
Yeah. Well, it did strike everybody as a little bit odd. We are people who've been here all day. We need a break. Right.
Need to go and have a little bit of a nap.
And then when America woke up the next morning, suddenly thousands of votes had been added in many of these states, and they were all for Joe Biden. And little by little, over the next 4 days, those states got whittled away to the point where Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania have all been called for Biden. North Carolina has been called for Trump. Georgia and Nevada are still in the balance, as is Arizona. Although I do believe that Trump's been confirmed for Alaska today. Now, why this matters is, of course, that different states, depending on the size of their populations, have got different numbers of votes to cast in the electoral college. And, when one candidate gets to 270 electoral college votes, they are normally presumed to be the winner. So by stopping that counting, and also by not calling states that clearly could have been called for Trump, it artificially suppressed Trump's confirmed electoral college votes while artificially bumping Biden's electoral college votes to the point where we got to 4 o'clock-ish on Saturday, where the media then decided in a united effort they were all going to call it for Joe Biden. So that's basically how we got to the point where the media is saying that Joe Biden is the president-elect of the United States. But the problem is, fundamentally, that the media does not decide who wins the election.
Absolutely.
So what we have here is a situation where, unlike other candidates in different times, President Trump has not conceded the election. And he is fighting the election, and he's fighting to challenge all of these votes in all of these places in a wide diversity of ways. And what this means is that in terms of actually confirmed electoral college votes, Biden has not passed 270 because many of these states, of course, are still toss-ups. They're still in dispute. They're not settled. So the reality is that at this point, neither candidate has got over 270. And in fact, if you look at it in a certain way, President Trump is ahead.
What do you mean by that?
Well, I mean that if you look at the confirmed states and take away the states which are in dispute, President Trump is ahead.
Oh, I see. Yeah. Okay. Right. I've got you. Yeah.
Yeah. But of course, that's not the media narrative. So, I mean, Wisconsin is 10 votes, Michigan 16, Pennsylvania 20, North Carolina 15, Georgia 16, and Nevada 6. So you put that together, and these states now clearly represent, the balance of the electoral college toss-up as to which way this is likely to go. Now, another thing which was really notable on the night of the election was Fox News.
They're getting a bit of a sting from people boycotting them now, aren't they?
Oh, a bit of sting. I would say full roast.
Mm.
The flamethrower of public opinion.
I had a similar experience. When I listened to talk radio, as it's one of the more tolerant or tolerable stations I listen to when I'm driving about. And I kind of enjoyed listening to Julie Hartley Brewer because she had a bit of a backbone. She'd speak out against stuff, particularly about the virus and so on. But even she was just basically Biden's won and stuff. And I'm thinking, it makes me doubt some of these people because they were very quick.
And also Andrew Neil.
Yeah.
They're full on TDS.
Yeah.
What's the other chap? Mike Graham.
Oh,
that's the one.
Yeah.
He's being fair. He's being fair. Also, Majid Nawaz over on LBC.
Oh, really?
Is being fair. Yes, you want to check him out.
He's a sneaky one. He's kind of he now and again he kind of sticks himself in the picture, but I still don't trust him.
But he doesn't like the fact that Hunter Biden, Biden's son, is connected investment-wise to a Chinese firm which is profiting off the slavery of Uyghur Muslims.
Yeah. Oh, but
Uyghur Muslims, I think it's pronounced more accurately. Yeah.
They don't like Trump, and that's all there is to it. They don't care about facts.
There are other elements to all this. Who becomes president of the United States has global ramifications. In fact, people should perhaps have a look at Israel.
Yeah.
Because if they think that Israel is going to tolerate the resumption of the Iran nuclear program, we're bribing Iran not to make nuclear weapons where they're making them anyway. They really seriously need to have another thing coming because a Biden presidency could quickly become the flashpoint for a major Middle East war.
I think didn't the president is it president or prime minister of Israel? He congratulated Biden, and I heard that Trump defriended him on Facebook.
Yes, he did. But there's diplomacy and there's politics, and they're not necessarily the same thing.
Yeah.
So the realities of things may turn out to be rather different. And also, of course, our own Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, has bent over to congratulate Biden, as has the Taoiseach and also Mr. Macron and Angela Merkel. But while
not the Mexican one, not the Mexican leader, not the Chinese,
Mexican one, not the Mexican president, and also not President Xi and not President Putin.
Yeah.
So Russia and China are refusing to get drawn in on who's won this. Mm. Now you could look at that, and if you're a Democrat, you'd probably go, "Yeah, that's because Trump's their puppet." Yeah. But more realistically, they're not prepared to take sides in this at the moment because they can see it isn't over.
Yeah.
Now, this whole business. We've sort of looked at what these key battlegrounds are, and we need to understand that one thing that doesn't matter in American elections is the popular vote. Of course, it mattered greatly in European elections when we used to have those because it was a proportional representation system. So the more votes you got, the more power you got.
Yeah.
But it's in the same way that Britain's first past the post electoral system for Westminster, it isn't about the popular vote. Yeah. It's about the votes that count.
It's the United States.
It's about winning those key constituencies.
It's the United States,
America
not the United
States.
It's
such a vast place. Any individual state can be larger than other people's countries. So we're talking about such a vast amount of votes in different places, but it can come down to a few thousand here and there that can make the difference in these popular vote counts. Now, that certainly seems to be the way in Wisconsin, Michigan, certainly Nevada, possibly Georgia is going to be very tight. But Pennsylvania is a little bit different, and I think there's a reason why, and I'm going to come into that, because we need to ask the question: what evidence is there to support the idea that there has been voting shenanigans going on. Now, I mean, just to ask you the question, Paul, from what you've managed to absorb so far, do you feel 100% certain that there's been vote fraud, or maybe, or not really seen anything that kills it for you? How is it coming across to you? What's your feedback on that question?
I was convinced there was some fraud in the midterms and even the 2016 election.
Yes.
If I was to just purely comment on this, I'd say there's definitely evidence of fraud. Whether there's evidence of enough to impact the result, I don't know. I'm eagerly waiting to find out. But I think
that is the $24 million question, isn't it?
Yeah.
Is there fraud? Is there enough fraud? Well, of course, the media, bless their socks, have spent the last 4 years telling us that Russia hacked the last election. Oh no, So they've basically been saying that the American system is wide open. Only this time they're now saying, oh, of course there's no vote fraud. Don't be silly.
It's impossible.
But now that has inched along to, well, might be some vote fraud, but not major.
Yeah.
But I would say the reality is that America is the land of the dollar. And if you've got dollars, you can make things happen.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that in terms of election integrity, some parts of America have been bad jokes for decades. Absolutely decades. And, this matters much more at a state level where it doesn't take so many votes. And it's not just politicians, it's also judges and and sheriffs and other roles like that in society, which are open to public votes and therefore open to potential vote fraud. And we can cite no end of cases, certainly in Pennsylvania, not too distant past, major vote fraud with major prison time, and on a wider sense, when it comes to electronic voting around the world, it's well known that electronic voting can be hacked, that can be faked. Because if you control the software, you control the counting of the votes. Now, it might be interesting to people to know that there's a guy called Clinton Eugene Curtis, who also known these days as Clint Curtis.
Right.
And he's actually standing in this election as the Democratic candidate for Florida's 6th congressional district. Which is a race that hasn't been decided yet. But 14 years ago, Clinton Curtis testified that he had been employed by a Republican politician called Tom Thelby and a company called Yang Enterprises. I'm not sure if there's a connection there. And he was hired to create software to rig elections. And the basic idea is that this software operates in the background, but unless you get into the source code, it's invisible and you can't see it. And it takes a certain amount of votes from one candidate and dumps them onto the other candidate. And, this issue of software fraud of elections is a global issue, and it's definitely real.
Yeah, I can't see why people haven't talked about it more. It's terrible. Terrible. Well,
yeah, I mean, this was all talked about 4 years ago as well.
Yeah.
Because of the Clinton campaign's claims about Russia, this was all being investigated as to whether voting machines could be hacked. And then there was testimony that, yes, you can remotely hack voting machines, but of course not all of them. We don't all have modems. But if you control that software, you potentially have the ability to adjust the vote. Now, I would think that, anybody having a sensible look at voting fraud would see that the one thing which is really problematic is if you cheat it too much, it gets too obvious. And I think that this is where the many anomalies which are rapidly coming to light about this presidential election in multiple states suggests that something really outside of the realm of accidental possibility has gone on. You see, there's a law called Benford's Law, and it's a law of statistical analysis. So people can go look it up, and you'll find out that Benford's Law is used to detect fraud in numbers in all sorts of ways. And it's basically a mathematical proof that says that the majority of numbers should tend to be smaller, not larger numbers, because of how numbers come together. So if you're adding up numbers, if you're getting in votes from here, then here, and here, and here, they should tend to be lots of smaller amounts rather than big dumps.
That's right. Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
You know. Now, according to the Benford Law analysis of these results, the Trump vote looks perfectly normal. It looks exactly like you might expect a vote to look like, whereas the Biden vote is all over the damn place. So just on that alone, it suggests that something's really wrong with the numbers of the Biden votes. And if we were looking at the possibility of electronic interference, then that is certainly one of the major tells that would suggest that large numbers of votes have been switched from one candidate to the other in the order of at least 3%. Because, of course, if you could bump Biden's vote by 3%, you're also taking 3% off Trump, and you're creating a gap of 6.
That's it. Yeah.
Yes. That if they switched round the other way, it'd be the other way. And if you look at how close some of these races are, it's anything like that could certainly be stealing the vote for Biden. Now,
there's some big races though. There's some where I think Biden won by about 150,000, and there's some that's got quite a margin that would take quite a lot of fraud discovered to reverse them.
The one we're really looking at there is Pennsylvania.
I think it's that.
And Pennsylvania is a very different story because Pennsylvania has no voting machines.
Oh,
it's paper only.
Interesting.
So when the counting closed, Pennsylvania was 700,000 up for Trump, and at this point in time, it's around 500,000 up for Biden. So we're looking at 1.3 million votes needed to produce that shift. But what happened in Pennsylvania is pretty damning, because there are supposed to be poll watchers, you see, Paul, people from both parties who can be within 6 feet of the counting so they can observe that everything's looking on the level. And what happened in Pennsylvania was that basically all the Republican vote counters were either completely thrown out or were kept at a much greater distance of 50, 60 yards. And at the same time, windows were blocked off so people couldn't see in from outside and so forth. And this is part of the lawsuit that Rudy Giuliani is bringing in Pennsylvania, which could result, because anything counted during that time has broken the law for how the count should be conducted. And not only that, but apparently they've tossed away the security envelopes which allow them to verify the ballots. We could be looking at 500,000 plus ballots being thrown out in Pennsylvania. Because it looks like there may have been some massive paper effort rather than electronic effort.
If they've broken the rules by not letting people see, then surely there's a case, say, right, from this point to this point, this time, we know that the observers will keep, that's breaking the law. Surely that merits, well, then that all needs to be recounted with watchers there.
That's exactly what is happening. It is that exactly the case which is being brought in that instance.
But that won't help if they've got fraudulent. I mean, if they've got fraudulent ballots, that won't help, will it? Because they'll just count the fraudulent ballots again. They have to find a way to see how
There is more to it still than that. You see, there are recounts and there are audits, and the two are not the same. Now, you can order a recount, but a recount is basically done by the same people who did the original count.
Yeah.
But an audit is at a federal level where armed federal investigators come in and take over, and there may well be added security to these ballots that the people at the state level were not aware of, by which I mean hidden watermarks.
Ah, I've heard about
So
this.
if it comes to a physical audit, if these ballots are fakes, that's going to be discovered.
It could also be that could work in two ways, because they could obviously use that to discover the faulty ballots, but that's also leverage, because they could say to them, "You do know this is what we've got," and you almost just say to them, "Do a recount, and you know which ones to get rid of." You know what I mean? So it would almost be be easier to do that.
It could be used as leverage to avoid being completely exposed, and all of a sudden,
because there's an element maybe they don't want to.
100,000 votes switched back to Trump in Georgia.
Yeah.
So not everything is small amounts. Some of this is very large amounts.
How much in Georgia did you say? Could you? Sorry, I missed
glitches.
That. How much was switched in Georgia?
Hang on, I'll have to get up the precise numbers on that one, Paul. You have to bear with me a second there, because I've just got to.
I thought you said it.
No, I don't have the exact number exactly to hand for Georgia, but it's much less. Pennsylvania is by far the biggest.
Yeah.
That's the most important one. When you want something to work and you go, where do I put that?
I do that all the time, mate.
Oh, don't read it. That's probably the link I want. Let me see. I've bookmarked so much stuff just in the last few days.
I heard it was 6,000. Was it 6,000?
It probably is around there. Come on. Whoa. No, I'm going to move on, Paul.
I think I might be wrong. I thought it was 6,000, and 2,000 of those were all Biden, and 4,000. Sorry, 2,000 were all
it's
Trump.
Around that. It's in around that order. Yes, it is around that order. It works
out that basically Trump lost about 4,000 or 5,000 votes. Basically, just took from him from the computer, which in itself is because that is, you could lose that state with that mistake. Right there, no one's talking about it. It's massive. That's a massive issue, and it's kind of like, oh, there was a glitch. Yeah.
It is. It's a huge issue.
Sorry, guys.
Look, here's how it is. If President Trump was conceding, it wouldn't matter. And presidential elections are normally based on who concedes, not on the count of the votes.
Yeah.
There are some historians who believe that JFK lost the election in 1960, for example. But because his opponent conceded, that never came to light. So we have these nice, especially with America, where there's so many votes to count, and so therefore so many votes to question. It rarely comes down to a completely accurate, tabulated, 100% verified count of votes. It's very much more what side believes they've won, and of course, there is a great deal of expense involved in challenging these things. So it's also about who's got the money to burn. We can illustrate that slightly because, of course, in 2016, Jill Stein, the Green Party candidate, did order recounts in 3 states.
I remember that, yeah.
Because she was looking to identify whether the Democrats had stolen Green votes to bump up Clinton's numbers.
Didn't she find out that Trump had them stolen from him or something?
She did, in fact, find out that Trump had been stolen from, No, not by vast numbers, but by some. That cost her $7 million. And by the end of that, she had no more chips to play at the casino.
Yeah.
Whereas Donald Trump can just flog a building. This has always been Trump's power.
He doesn't look like he's about to back off, does he?
Their money.
Yeah, he doesn't look like he's about to back off. That's for sure.
He ain't backing off. He isn't backing off. There's no way he's backing off. And even more than that, it could be Trump on his own in his castle and everybody else slinking away, but that's not what's happening either.
Yeah.
Major player Mitch McConnell, the leader of the Senate, has come 100%. In the first 2 or 3 days, it was a bit hairy as to where the rest of the GOP were. Where are you, GOP?
I suppose they're a bit nervous. They're like, right, do we want to do this?
But since the media called it for Biden, the rallying has been extremely strong.
Yeah.
And, Mitch McConnell is recognised as, one of Washington's most ruthless politicians. And if he felt that Trump was on a loser, he'd be saying so.
Yeah.
And he's saying the exact opposite. Mike Pompeo, considered to be one of the most serious people in Washington, straight out said yesterday, there's going to be a smooth transition to a second Trump term.
Yeah.
So, these people know something. Bill Barr's back in action. People have been wondering for weeks where Bill Barr is. Bill Barr's back in action. Gina Haspel, head of the CIA, was in a meeting with McConnell yesterday. Trump has shifted major positions at the Pentagon. And he's basically got some proper war fighters in there.
Yeah.
So if there's civil disturbances over all this, believe you me, it looks like he's ready for it. So this is serious stuff. And of course, some of the Democrats are getting quite scared by all this. And to a certain extent, I can understand that. But the question remains, who can trust these votes? And if you get a point where neither side can believe in the results of the election, you've got a major problem holding on to your free country. So this is clearly a battle in the courts and politically that has to happen. And, we have to hope for America's sake, but at the end of it, we get to somewhere where people from both sides of the aisle can come together. But that means that if Trump's going to be exposing fraud from the Democrats, it's got to be huge and it's got to be overwhelming.
Yeah.
Now, in terms of the type of fraud that has gone on, I mean, there are now hundreds of affidavits from people saying they've seen things, whether they be poll watchers or postmen or all sorts of different people. And these are affidavits under oath, under threat of perjury. So this isn't just like someone making something up. These are serious legal citations, serious evidence being put into the legal system.
Well, I thought it was quite good, a bit of positivity for the Democrat Party if they're found guilty here, is that guy Vernon Jones, who's a Democrat in Georgia, and he's actually come out saying, he smells fraud. He's putting his hand up saying, we've got to call this out. And to be honest, if you kind of look at him and you think if anyone's going to salvage the Democrat Party, people like him, next election makes it more approachable, doesn't it? But it's if they're guilty.
This is kind of the thing here, is that Trump is portrayed as just this terribly divisive figure, but it's the media which has been divisive all along.
Yeah.
And if we rolled the clock back a year, with the American economy performing, incredibly, there is certainly evidence of movement towards working with Trump from the Democratic side. Because, it looked like there was no way this guy was going to be able to be beaten at the election. Mm. Because his delivery was so overwhelming. In fact, about the only election promise he didn't deliver on was the one to bang Hillary Clinton up in jail.
Oh, that would have been good.
That's about the only one he didn't do.
It makes you wonder if
brought troops home.
If they prove this was as stinking full of fraud as it looks like it probably was, then there's every chance, maybe not to this extent, but there's every chance even last election there was a lot of it going on. Then as it makes you think, it kind of it's
going to take something like that for there to be the consensus that this could never happen again.
Yeah.
And that, if there's going to be a better future for American democracy, and if this election is as rotten as I certainly believe it looks like it is, then America's got to come to that point. And that means that, people have got to be shocked out of their trances, and the media's got to be exposed for what for what it is. So and a solution has got to be brought in of some kind of encrypted quantum bit blockchain voting that isn't hackable by anybody ever again.
Yeah.
So that everyone can have a faith in the integrity of one person, one vote in America. And, and if that is the ultimate outcome of this, it's far more important than whether it's Donald Trump or Joe Biden in the White House for the next 4 years, as much as I don't think a Biden presidency would be good for the world.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. It changes the whole fabric of society. But then again, it also makes you doubt what has been, because you think how many in the past has been this. I mean, I suppose in a way, if this is blown open, it's got to be looked at as a good thing. Say, right, we've got to correct this election, and now we've just got to make sure that everyone, even in this country, we say we must not allow this to happen again.
Well, I want to quickly run through some of the different types of fraud that we're looking at, just to make it clear that this isn't just stolen in one way. It's a multifaceted strategy of different types of election fraud in different places that add up to the picture of stealing a lot of votes, And I mean, on the first level, you've got the idiots. Because, there's a lot of people who got Trump derangement syndrome, who would just feel entitled to, if they had a chance to wreck some ballots.
Oh, it's so crass.
They just take it, So there are, these aren't necessarily people who are part of any organised effort, and there's quite a few different videos and posts, etc., on social media of people going ha 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 in various different ways, and of course I wouldn't want to be any of them, the twats, but they did it, So you've got, on one level, you've got idiots, and they're certainly going to be responsible for destroying a number. And if there's enough idiots, that could become thousands of votes across the country. Then you've got the dead voting, which, of course, well known that, especially in America, your electoral rolls are full of dead people. It happens in this country too. It tends to be the Conservatives who think we're dead to vote, by the way. Labour does other things. But, so you've got the dead voters. Then you've got the ghost voters. And the ghost voters are people who've never existed in the first place. So some of the stories that have come out is that if a ballot was didn't have a name on it, they've just been putting a name on it. So they've just been forging identities of people who don't even exist. Not that they're dead and used to vote, but they're dead, so they can't vote now, but now voting from beyond the grave. But people didn't exist in the first place. And another possibility, which as yet the evidence is still being gathered for, is what's being called Maidengate, which is, did Joe Biden really do as well with women as he appears to have done?
I doubt it.
Because there's some evidence to suggest that women have been voting in their maiden names. So the woman's married, obviously she changes her name, so she's Mrs. She used to be Mrs. Bloggs, now she's Mrs. Smith. Mrs. Smith thinks she voted normally, but when you're checking the rolls, Miss Bloggs voted too. So that's another form of using IDs that on first glance might appear to be genuine, but when you dig into it, it's a different story. And then we've got whistleblowers. There's hundreds of whistleblowers. Growing by the hour. In fact, I mean, I don't know what new information will have come out by the time I finish doing this podcast with you.
70, I think 70 drivers, wasn't it? 70 drivers, ballot drivers, have come forward to...
There's a chap called Richard Hopkins, who's a postman in Pennsylvania. And he blew the whistle through Project Veritas. But he had overheard his supervisor being chewed out by his manager. So this would probably have been on November 5th, he went to Project Veritas because he had heard his supervisor's manager chewing him out because he said you're supposed to backdate them all to the 3rd, meaning they pick up ballots that hadn't been delivered. Yeah, the law in Pennsylvania is they have to be postmarked for the 3rd to be counted. So they were collecting ballots on the 4th and dating them to the 3rd. But on the 5th, he heard this supervisor getting chewed out by a manager because one of the ballots slipped through dated the 4th and not the 3rd. So he blew the whistle on organised ballot fraud inside the post service. And that affidavit, sworn affidavit from Mr. Hopkins, who, by the way, is a Marine veteran. Before he became a postman, he was in the Marines. That sworn affidavit is now a major problem in Washington, because something like that is driving. It's a major plank of Trump driving for getting recounts or audits in Pennsylvania. So yesterday, the Washington Post put out a story saying that Mr. Hopkins had retracted his affidavit. It was citing anonymous sources who, from anonymous federal agents. And basically the claim was that he'd signed a retraction. And then within a few minutes, Project Veritas was blasting it out. Oh, no. Not only has Mr. Hopkins not retracted his affidavit, we've got 2 beautiful hours of tape of these federal goons leaning on him, trying to use subliminal mind manipulation techniques on him, trying to get him to retract it, which he wouldn't do.
Yeah, so they've tried for him. Yeah.
This is like major goon squad stuff going on, because the ultimate truth here, especially if we've got corruption like that inside the United States Postal Service, is people going to jail for a long, long time.
That's what, and that's what a lot of them will deserve. But we're pressing on that time, and there's one thing we haven't touched on, which I'm sure is going to have some very interesting overtones, and that's QAnon.
Pressing on time. Well, I'm going to be very quick on Q because I want to finish up by saying how Trump could still win this election, which I think is something very important to get across. Q made a post just before the election, basically, sort of a kind of morale boosting, go for it, America kind of post, and Q has had a little bit to say in the couple of weeks before the election, especially on the topic of Hunter Biden and his laptop. But Q is on a drought at the moment. We've not had Q for 9 days. So at the moment, Q is staying out of it. But people who do follow the Q information will know that when Q is quiet, it usually means he's up to something. So I can't really give a perspective on Q's view of the election, but I would say that Q was active up until the election, but has chosen to be quiet so far afterwards. But what I really want to get across is that I want people to understand Trump can still be president. This is not a pipe dream. This is not a remote chance. This is a very real constitutional possibility. And the reason is that there are certain circumstances where even the electoral college votes don't matter. Now, imagine this scenario. You've got multiple states where this is true, but certainly going to be true for at least 4 states. The legal action is ongoing. The question of the election cannot be settled by the deadline of 14th of December, which is when the electoral college electorate is supposed to certify the results. Under those circumstances, if the results are disputed, and considering that majority of these battleground states of the state level are controlled by Republicans in both houses, it's entirely possible that they could decline to certify those electoral college results. At that point, the question of where those electoral college votes should be allocated would go to the Supreme Court of the United States. Now, the Supreme Court could, as it did in the year 2000 in Bush versus Gore, make a judgment on where those votes should go. So they could award Trump the presidency at the Supreme Court level. Or they could decline to do that, and they could kick it to Congress for Congress to vote on. But if it went to Congress, it's not for congressmen and women who would make that vote, but it would be a state legislative vote per state through Congress. And the Republicans control at least 28 and possibly 29 of the legislatures of the 50 states. So they vastly outnumber Democrats if the question of the presidency came down to a congressional vote. On that basis, therefore, if Donald Trump can keep the results in dispute for another month, then the question of these electoral college votes could end up completely bypassed. And that is not pie in the sky.
Yeah.
That is absolutely, completely real, and it's how the American Constitution works. And some Democrats have cottoned onto this, and they are getting very frightened about it. Because the question is that we would have to decide is whether we would feel that that would be justified. And that would really depend on the overall balance of this evidence of fraud, which is coming out. And if Trump has major whistleblowers, especially from inside a electoral computer company called Dominion, which operates in 30 states, and we've heard today that there are whistleblowers coming forward from inside Dominion, then it could be that the people would be behind him. Certainly, his electorate will be completely behind him. And we're likely to see rallies for Trump, on the streets, especially this weekend, with people getting out there and showing their support for the president and their support for him contesting the election. It's not going to be, it's not going to be like Bush and Gore. We're talking about millions of people showing their support for the president here.
What you just said there.
It's entirely possible he can win this, Paul.
What you've just said there, because one of the things I was thinking about is almost like you think if they just ignore Trump and just drag this on, it's going to be really hard for Trump just to suddenly not go along with it. But what you're saying is actually quite the opposite. There's actually a way that if it prolongs and the more evidence,
cards here.
and the more evidence he builds up, then
not least because he's the president and Joe Biden isn't.
Yeah.
So when it comes to the federal government and what the federal government can do, like audit the states, President Trump is in a vastly superior position to Joe Biden. I think what's going to be interesting here is Nevada, because if Nevada is comes out as a narrow toss-up for Trump, and Joe Biden, well, let's put it the other way. If Nevada comes up as a narrow toss-up for Biden, we know for a fact Trump is going to contest it. But if it's a narrow toss-up for Trump, will Biden contest it?
He's got nothing to lose. I suppose money would be the only.
He might have quite a bit to lose if it's going to show up further efforts to swing it for Biden inside the state. So if Trump is fighting but Biden won't, I think that communicates quite powerfully as to how confident Biden really is of his position. Wouldn't you?
Yeah, it's very. It's moved quite quickly within a week. There's been a lot of details revealed within a week. I think he's going to need soon. Within the next week, we're going to need to start seeing some more action. Something. I think he needs to take a state. We need that. That needs to be a headline. Trump takes this one. Then people start listening.
Maybe not. If the idea is just to keep this all contested until the 14th of December, Trump will just sit there. Yeah. Who cares what the media says? Yeah. Who cares?
Yeah, they don't run the election.
He'll be out there. He'll be rallied. His base will be rallied to him. But it doesn't matter. But I mean, in terms of what might make us feel, we got something more to put. Have that BBC. Look at that. Yeah, we'd like that. Obviously, we would. But I'm not sure that we're going to get it or not. But what I do think is that let's finish this up by saying, if people want to support Donald Trump to fight this fight and either regain the presidency or at least expose the corruption in the American electoral system, then the thing to do is to support Donald Trump. Go onto his Twitter, whatever he tweets about, retweet it or put it back out, whatever platform you use, Gab, Parler, anything you've got, because of course most of us have had our platforms decimated. Yeah. Did I tell you that Patreon have destroyed my account? Bastards.
Another one bites the dust, as they say.
150 articles.
Yeah, they're just terrible. They're terrible.
Arseholes,
the way they do it.
Let alone Aslan's army, both the group and the page have been destroyed on Facebook yet again. Yeah. So, yeah. I mean, everything I built platform-wise over the last 4 years has been destroyed, Paul.
Yeah. Well, it was disheartening.
I'm hanging on to my Twitter account at the moment.
It was disheartening. With THA Talks as well. I had quite a healthy Facebook page, a few other ones building up, and then when it's just pulled from underneath you, people don't realise you put a lot of hard work into it, and it's really disheartening. You know, it is.
It's designed to break our morale. You know, but I mean that's just how it goes. But back to the point that I'm making here is whatever you got, use it to support the president. And not only support what the president says on his Twitter, but go down through the Twitter, and wherever there's people supporting President Trump, follow them and support them too. And that's something that anyone can do. It's very simple, and it will continue to keep on getting out the positive messaging. Oh, and mind the bots, because Joe Biden has spent millions of dollars on bots. They're actually Indian bots, so I'm not sure if they're Kamala Harris's relatives. But they're basically putting out different types of morale sapping posts.
I've seen these repeated messages. You get about 4 of them in a row saying, I saw about 8 of them in a row.
Saying, Donald Trump, I can't live with Biden, I'm going to leave the country. Or they're saying, I love to see Trump supporters cry. I live to see you cry. You know, crap.
They're not doing a very good job of it because they keep. It's like I've seen about like 5 of them, and the first time I saw it, I thought, what an idiot. And then I thought, why are these guys all copying and pasting each other?
Again and again and again.
I thought they were all copying and pasting at first, but obviously, yeah.
And one of the things, they're not just on Trump's feed, they're on Biden's feed too, and other things like Kamala Harris's. And the idea is to either directly weaken morale or to present Trump supporters to Biden supporters as idiots.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Yeah, well, if you say, I'm going to leave America and go to Alaska, of course, Alaska is part of America. You know, so it's like, I love President Trump, and oh no, Biden's won, I'm going to leave and go to Alaska. It's all psyops crap. But I'm fully confident that listeners to THA have developed their immunity to such low tactics a very long time ago.
I think so.
Anything else we can talk about to finish this up, Paul?
Well, no, I mean, that's nail-biting stuff, really. I think everyone's on the edge of their seats with this one. We've obviously got... let's close up with what you think of this lockdown. Do you think they're really going to hammer this home into next year, or do you think we're seeing the end of it?
I think if President Trump had conceded, the lockdown would be finishing early.
Mm. Oh, really?
Mm.
I would have thought the other way around.
I think the lockdown in Britain especially is to do with the American election.
Oh yeah.
Because then, but if Biden would then made to say, look, Britain's locked down, so we've got a lockdown, you know. But with President Trump's out of the way, who needs the virus anymore, Paul?
Yeah. Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah, that's well, yeah, you could say that, or just to make it look like, oh, you know, look how good life's got since Biden's been in. See, everyone can go back and have a drink now, and everyone sort of thinks, oh, this ain't so bad after with Biden, is it?
How to make coronavirus disappear? Turn off the television, take off your mask, forget about it.
No, I'm a little bit more, and I kind of think that if Biden done it, I don't know whether lockdown would end, to be honest, because a lot of the supporters they're very good at using fear, and they use this at Trump. Oh, he uses fear to. No, I think Biden uses fear.
Well,
You know, they
maybe I'm a bit flippant with that opinion. Perhaps I was, because I'm not really sure of that.
You may be right. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think the point is that I do feel that Boris Johnson wants a Biden presidency.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of sins.
Yeah.
From Boris's days as Foreign Secretary, when he was signing off on GCHQ surveillance because of dodgy FISA warrants.
Well, I gave Boris my vote because of Brexit, and to be honest, I gave him a chance. I hoped it was a reform, but I've lost faith. I think we had our chance.
We had a certain amount of leverage on him until the coronavirus.
And then the true face came out.
And then, he's just stuck up to the UN, and that's it.
Yeah.
Everything he's talking about, build back better.
Yeah.
There's a conversation going on. Who's stealing whose slogan between Biden and Boris with build back better? Because, of course, they're both using it. Yeah. But the truth is, it's neither of their slogans. It's coming out of the United Nations.
That's it, yeah. Yeah, no, I've got no time for Boris anymore. You can move on as soon as possible, as far as I'm concerned.
Unfortunately, we're stuck with him.
Yeah, I'm dreading Brexit. I don't think he's going to deliver Brexit. Sorry to be negative. I think he's last minute. He's going to break our hearts with it last minute.
Our options are limited on that right now. Yeah. We just have to see how it goes, and whatever it is, we continue the fight.
Yeah.
But it's already very clear with the cost of locking down the country for the coronavirus has already destroyed many of the things that we were hoping to preserve and build on with Brexit.
That's right. Yeah, that's what I mean. It's like they've.
We might. Would it have made a difference if we'd have had Jeremy Corbyn, especially for the people who voted Conservative for the economics?
Yeah. It's
all turned into a bit of a joke.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Corbyn, Boris, they're all absolutely useless. I think the only person, I know a lot of people roll their eyes, the only person that is consistent in his views and the way he wants to do things and has got a big backbone is good old Nigel Farage, to be honest.
Yeah,
we've turned it up.
I would have to say that I would find it a little bit difficult to back Farage again, on the basis that he ensured I couldn't back him last year.
What was that?
Because he stood down the Brexit party. So if you happened to be in a constituency that had a Conservative, you were stuffed. And I understand why he did it. But if he built that whole platform and then stood down at the last moment, and honestly, that was gutting for a lot of people who'd supported the Brexit party.
I understand.
So there is a trust question about Nigel, and I might prefer to see something come through in different ways. Yeah. He's not the only game in town, and after all, he would be coming back up from scratch. Yeah. But any political alternative that had Nigel Farage as part of it would certainly gain support.
Oh yeah, yeah. And the thing is, I think when he done that, when he dropped a lot of seats, I understand why he done it, because at the end of the day, if the fight had got too heated between Tories and Brexit Party, ultimately it would have benefited Labour and everyone else.
Yeah.
And it was always going to happen. So I think he took the view, look, you're the likely winners. I'm going to back off to make sure you win, but all I'm going to do is put as much heat on you.
We took it on the chin.
Because of the virus, it's kind of thrown all that out to the side now in a way. So it's kind of...
We took it on the chin, and we held our nose for the sake of preserving what we had fought for.
Yeah.
Whether that was the right decision or not, well, history is a great thing for hindsight, isn't it? But we didn't really have much choice.
Yeah, I mean, the only chance I think we got with Brexit is if they can see that the horse is dead. Look, we're going to have to leave now, and they just do it. Maybe he thinks, look, I'll get a good bit of a reputation for doing this if I do pull it off. So on a selfish level, he'll benefit from it. And maybe a lot of people just thought, you know what, just go, leave the EU.
Well, it could be, but Boris makes a last minute jump back the other way if it turns out that it's obvious that Donald Trump is staying in the White House after all by the time we get to the middle of December.
He could be just a slippery one that just follows whoever's winning.
If it went that way, we know he'd jump that way.
I think that's what it is with Boris.
Good idea of what he's like by now.
I think he just follows follow whoever's got the power. It's like, oh, I'm Biden now. Oh, Trump's back in again. Oh, well, I'm a populist again now, and that will do for the next 4 years.
But there we are. Well, I mean, that's the problem with the British establishment. It's been rotten for far too long that you can't expect it to show quality when it's actually put to the test. You know.
Yeah.
Oh well. A problem for another day.
Yeah, well, I think that's all we got time for this time. As I said earlier on to the listeners, it has been too long, I know. But we'll be back hopefully sooner than the last time.
Thank you very much, THA. Always good to talk to you. Hope you guys enjoy it. Oh, and don't forget to come and find me, John the White One, on Twitter while I'm still there.
Definitely, and we'll be speaking with John again soon.
All right, good night.
Till the next time. Bye.